In the southern Caribbean, there is a small village that seems unassuming and even a bit backward. There is nothing particularly special or unique that makes this place stand out at first glance, but maybe if you're lucky enough to get an aerial view, you might notice that this village exists in a weird triangle, the points marked by 3 separate cemeteries which surround the flat area of land where the living reside. I had a friend who grew up in that village, and subsequently left it, for a variety of reasons she slowly revealed to me during the course of our friendship. Some of her tales were wildly hilarious, some heartbreaking, and others were like the one that I'm about to tell you now. Several decades ago, a man was in his home transitioning from this realm to the next, something that takes more effort to do for some unlucky ones like himself. Anyone who understands the process even a little bit will tell you the same thing. They will say that, if given a choice, they would much prefer to peacefully pass away in their sleep at an old age. They say that, because to some degree, they understand what it is to go slowly, agonizingly, and filled with dread of the reaper's slow wedding march to their bedside, to claim a debt that must inevitably be paid. So it was with this man, who had been a terror in his younger years to those around him. A typical affliction of the men of his generation, who had more access to alcohol, vice, and government money than they did sense. Many of us are still walking around with afflictions that stem from men like him, who in their old age hobbled into church pews, and cried, and blamed history's greatest scapegoat for their misdeeds. If only they had once in their miserable lives admitted that the only devils they knew sat next to them in the bar, and looked into their eyes through the mirror, whenever they could stand to look at one. This man was no different. Society had allowed him to sublimate his bad behavior into convenient excuses his entire life, but now that life was coming to its end. Everyone knew it, they just didn't expect him to linger for days and days, writhing in pain as his organs shut down one by one. Most people don't realize that the body does not always expire all at once in these circumstances. Sometimes, organs shut down randomly, like they're playing a final game of rock, paper, scissors, turning the body into a corpse by degrees. A leg or arm may have stopped functioning the day before due to a lack of circulation, and turned black and rotted, while the rest of the body takes turns shutting down. That's where the smell comes from, each cell releasing its own, unique perfume, until the notes gather to form that final crescendo that every coroner would know from a mile off. My friend's great-grandmother was described to me as anything but soft. A large, strong woman worthy of the continent from which her bloodline sprung. She was sharp-tongued, quick-witted and wise. The other villagers respected her a great deal, and when this man's body had turned into all but a corpse with the spirit still trapped inside, they called her for help. So in her gruff, silent way, the old woman complied. She put on her shoes and head wrap and walked a few meters to the house in question. Once there, she was greeted in the way that her presence demanded, and was respectfully led to the dying man's bedside. She looked at him disdainfully from the tip of his balding head, to his shriveled, blackened feet that had already died under the thin bed sheets the day before. Her stern brown eyes traveled up again to the yellowed whiskers gathered around his cracked, gray lips. His eyes, the only organs that seemed fully alive in his entire body, pleaded for mercy. From her, from God. From any source that was willing really. He tried to say something, but his tongue had swollen and filled his mouth. It was as if someone had taken a fresh cow's tongue from the butcher's table, and stuffed it in there. He was straining for release, but it lingered out of his reach. A few moments passed before she exhaled sharply, and turned to the man's wife. "Stay there, I coming back just now," she said. Turning back to the man she addressed him sternly. "I know what you want. I coming to give it to you." With that, she turned her back and left the house. Several minutes later, she returned with a folded handkerchief in her hand. She walked in silently and laid it on the bed. Slowly and deliberately, she opened the folds to reveal a long, silver, hat pin. Pinching the sides of the old man's face, she commanded him to open his mouth. He complied, and the dark, swollen tongue rolled forward and over his bottom lip, covering all but the tip of his chin. As soon as she saw the ugly appendage flop forward, her other hand came down 3 times, almost too quickly for the human eye to see. The hat pin glinting like lightning with each jab. Everyone else in the room stood in silent shock as red-black rivers ran down the old man's chest, and his tongue deflated like a broken balloon. Tears filled the old man's eyes, and he looked in his wife's direction, and spoke for the first time in months. "I'm sorry." Shocked, the wife looked at the old woman standing by the bedside with a stern look on her face, then back down at the old man bleeding onto the sheets below, tears now streaming from his eyes as his focus remained locked on his wife's face. "I sorry," he repeated, "I sorry. I sorry. I sorry." His voice dwindled a little bit with every repeated phrase, and then stopped. His lifeless eyes still locked on the woman, who had reaped nothing but his vitriol, for over 5 decades. He had spoken his last words. Hello, this is Jay. Thank you for listening to the end. If you like my stories, please like, share, comment and subscribe to inspire me to share more of my work. Thanks for listening and see you next time.